Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Javiary. You can see some of my birds here. These are not permanent cages, these are quarantine cages. You hear that male red-throated parrotfinch singing. I thought today would be a good time to go over my quarantine process. Okay, so like I said, in quarantine right now, I've got 4 zebra finches, 2 shaft tails, and 2 red-throated parrotfinches, and then a zebra finch male, and then a Bork's parrot or Bork's parakeet. And they're in quarantine for basically, if we break it down, 2 main reasons: for their safety and for all these other birds' safety. And what do I mean by that? I don't want these birds to get sick, and I definitely don't want these birds to get my birds sick. So before I kind of get into actually my protocol, I'll just point out a few things. We have a physical divider here between these birds, and all these birds came together, but I've still separated them out into who I thought would fit where. Between these birds and all my other birds, and then I'm touching them last. So they have their own water, they're getting egg food in the mornings, they have their own food, but when I come in here in the morning to feed egg food and mealworms and everything else, I do every other bird, and then I get to these birds. They're isolated, and these aren't hospital cages. These are just quarantine cages. They'll live here for a few weeks, and then actually all these birds will go into the big aviary. But for now, they're here, and it allows me to do a few things. One is to observe them, like we're doing now. Another thing, if you can see, I've got plain masking paper there, and I can actually look at their poop, and that's very useful. You can tell a lot about a bird's health from their poop, their droppings, which bird droppings include both their poop and their urine, their urates. So what you're looking for in a healthy finch dropping, and let me see if I can find one, and keep in mind that they're eating, and they've spilled quite a bit of egg food just today, but you're looking for white and sort of whatever color they're eating. You're looking for not too runny. You don't want to see really bright green, which this stuff over here, that's all food, but we're looking at the urate. Let me see if I can show you with my finger right there. So dark green is okay, black, not dark black like digestive blood, but a darker stool would be okay. White is okay. We're not looking for bright green, we're not looking for yellow, we're not looking for really runny with no real consistent part. And so this poop's all looking pretty good, and we're just keeping an eye on it. So that's the main part here. Now I do have hospital cages set up, you can see, with heat on one side, and if I had a sick bird, I would move it over to the hospital cage. So now we'll go over my protocol. Welcome back, and for those of you who are new to the channel, haven't been here before, this is Einstein, my eclectus parrot. He's my buddy, and it's humid today, and he's been sick in his nose and his water, so he has some runny nose up there at the top of his beak, but he's okay. So we're talking about quarantine today, and in quarantine, in addition to everything I just talked about, I do also run some prophylactic medications. What prophylactic means is preventative. So even if I think the bird is totally healthy, these are the medications that I'll always use for the bird. Okay. The first medication is Scat, and I'm not sponsored by any of these companies, but Scat is an air sac mite and scaly mite treatment. It's very common, especially there's a Gouldian on the container for a reason, especially in Gouldians, your parrotfinches, a lot of your new world birds, and even, Einstein, I'll use this on him when I got him. And prophylactically, I'll actually dose most of my flock a few times a year with some sort of mite treatment. Air sac mites are a small mite that lives inside the bird in sort of their throat, in their trachea, and a lot of birds can just live with them and be fine. However, when they get stressed, so from like moving to a new environment or having babies or molting, this can kind of bubble up and overwhelm their system. So every bird gets scat. I use the inside of the thigh, like the inside of the leg on the bird. Some people also put a spot on the back. The main thing is you want to get a drop on their skin. Now, with the scat, you also want to ensure that you're using it twice. So the life cycle of the mites is exactly 21 days, so 3 weeks. You want to make sure that with the first dose, you get all the adults, and then whatever eggs they've laid will hatch. Day 21, dose again, and you'll kill the whole life cycle of the mite. So very important with scat, it's a 2-dose application. The next thing I always use is Ronnie-Vet. Now there are a couple different versions of Ronnie-Vet. There's Ronnie-Vet S, Ronnie-Vet 12%. They're different dosing, so make sure you're reviewing the dosing instructions on the bottle or the container. This prevents protozoal illnesses, specifically canker is kind of the common term. Very common in Gouldians and in some other birds. So I use this. It's a 7-day treatment, and the pink water in the birds over there that you saw before is what Ronnie-Vet looks like. This is a very safe medication. It's safe to use with chicks in the nest, and you can adjust the dosing. I wouldn't recommend going off-label. If you have questions, feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram or Facebook, and I'll try to help. And then the third medication I always use is some sort of dewormer. So I like Moxie-Vet for that. Another good option is S76. This will also do mites. If I was going to do S76, I would still do scat. And you want to be careful. You don't want to over-medicate healthy birds. But all 3 of these medications are pretty benign, pretty okay for healthy birds. But you want to ensure that you're not doing things like causing sterility or adding stress. So one thing I don't do is like a broad spectrum 4-in-1 type of antibiotic on every single new bird. Now, if I see a bird that I think is sick, that's a different discussion. But for quarantine, which is all I'm going to try to cover in this video, these are the 3 medications I'm always going to use. And that's going to dictate, because of the scat, at least a 3-week quarantine. I will go longer, especially if I have a bird that I'm concerned about. The main advice that I'd like to convey in this video is go slow and have patience. I know it's really hard. You get new birds, you want to see them with your flock. Maybe it's a male because you had a hen and you're completing a breeding pair. It is worth waiting the extra 3 weeks. Before I knew about quarantining and before I became as experienced of a bird keeper as I am now, I had to learn this the hard way. I bought a young shaft tail that looked healthy the day I bought him. He had a clean vent, clear eyes, no nasal discharge. He had a good weight to him. Brought him home and I just put him right in to my aviary at the time. The next day, he was all puffed up. The next day, he died. Also that next day, a bunch of my other birds were puffed up, and I ended up losing about 15 birds, including the new bird. And if I'd done quarantine, that would have shown itself. I would have maybe been able to treat that bird or only lost that bird instead of like a third of my flock. So I'm not just telling you to quarantine because, I'm a do-gooder and I've always followed the rules. I'm telling you because I've learned the hard way. Always quarantine your birds. Always here to help. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. That's all I've got for this video. Thanks, flock, for flying along with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Birds in the sky keeping me down. They won't let me inside of their town. How I wish I could be one of them. How I wish I could be one of them.